The winter of 2026 had a particular chill to it, one that seemed to seep into the very bones of Washington, D.C. It was a cold that wasn't just meteorological, it was political, born from the relentless churn of a 24-hour news cycle and the ever-widening chasm between the people who governed and the people who watched them govern from their living rooms. For the past month, the air had been thick with the kind of tension that precedes a thunderstorm, a collective holding of breath as the world watched the escalating conflict with Iran. It had started, as so many things do now, with a hashtag. After a series of joint U.S. and Israeli airstrikes on Iranian targets, an operation the administration had codenamed Epic Fury, reports began to trickle back home. They weren't reports of strategic victories or geopolitical gains. They were casualty lists. 6 American service members had been killed. The names were released, the families were notified, and for a brief shining moment, the nation paused to mourn. But the moment was fleeting, quickly swallowed by the maw of social media. The criticism wasn't just aimed at the policy, but at the man behind it. Pundits and ordinary citizens alike noted that President Donald Trump, in the days following the announcement of the casualties, seemed preoccupied. He had given a brief, somber statement at a Medal of Honor ceremony, but his attention, commentators noted with disgust, appeared to be elsewhere, most notably on the lavish renovations and plans for a new dance floor at the White House. The contrast was stark and, for many, unforgivable. He didn't seem to feel the weight of the 6 flag-draped coffins, and that disconnect gave birth to a new viral phenomenon. It started subtly, a meme here, a sarcastic tweet there. The sentiment was simple, brutal, and cutting. If the president is so willing to project American strength abroad, why should he be immune from the most personal cost of that projection? Why should his family be shielded? The name on everyone's lips wasn't Donald Trump Jr., who had been a vocal hawk during his father's first term, or Eric, who ran the family business. It was the youngest, the quietest, the one who loomed in the background of every family photo like a gentle giant. Barron Trump. The hashtag #SendBarron began to trend on X, formerly Twitter. It was a rallying cry for the anti-war left, a satirical dagger for late-night comedians, and for a significant portion of the disenfranchised middle, a provocative question. If this war is so righteous, let the president's son lead the charge. Show us the Trump family's patriotism. Photoshopped images began to circulate. Barron's lanky 6'9" frame photoshopped into combat fatigues, his head shaved in a basic training buzz cut. They were absurd, but they carried an undercurrent of genuine anger that made them impossible to ignore. Among those watching this digital wildfire spread was a man named Toby Morton. Toby was a comedy writer by trade, a veteran of the sharp, satirical trenches of shows like South Park and Mad TV. But in the years since the last election, he had found a new, more niche calling. He had become a one-man wreck crew of digital political performance art, building satirical websites that were designed to go viral and expose what he saw as the hypocrisy and authoritarian leanings of the new administration. He called it petty digital revenge, and he was very, very good at it. As he scrolled through his feed on the night of February 28th, watching the hashtag #SendBarron trend climb, an idea began to crystallize. The memes were funny, but they were fleeting. They'd be forgotten by next week. He needed something with staying power, a central hub for the sentiment, a place where the satire was so sharp it could cut through the noise of the news cycle. By 2 a.m., his fingers were flying across his keyboard. He registered a domain name, draftbarrontrump.com. The site he built was a masterpiece of deadpan satire. It aped the aesthetic of the official White House website, all heroic portraits, Americana color schemes, and soaring rhetoric. But the text was something else entirely. America is strong because its leaders are strong.
the homepage blared over a heavily airbrushed image of the president. President Trump proves that every day. Naturally, his son Barron is more than ready to defend the country his father so boldly commands. If you're looking for proven genes, inherited courage, and unquestionable resolve, look no further than the Trump family. Leadership starts somewhere. He populated it with fabricated quotes, each one a perfect distillation of the public's perception of the Trump family's privilege. A fake testimonial from Donald Trump Jr. read, "This moment is really about Barron, okay? Always has been. He represents strength, courage, and service. I'll be honoring that sacrifice in my own way, mainly by talking about it from a safe distance." Another, from Eric Trump, was so absurdly self-centered that it circled back to being brilliant political commentary, talking about making pancakes while his brother was off at war. He punctuated the page with perfectly chosen images of the president dozing off during briefings, his eyes closed, his chin on his chest, a visual punchline to accompany the text thesis. He's asleep at the wheel, but he's wide awake when it comes to sending other people's children to die. He hit publish just hours after the initial strike on Iran. The site spread like wildfire. Within days, the phenomenon had evolved beyond Toby's control. The satirical calls for Barron's enlistment collided with a bizarre piece of misinformation. A Threads user posted a simple, unsubstantiated claim. The White House says Barron Trump is too tall at 6'9" to serve in the military. The post compared him to NBA star David Robinson, who had served in the Navy despite his height, implying a special exemption for the privileged. There was zero evidence the White House had ever said such a thing, but in the chaotic information ecosystem of 2026, evidence was often an afterthought. The too tall narrative exploded. It was too perfect. It combined the idea of the president's son being coddled with a specific bureaucratic-sounding excuse. News outlets, from serious foreign papers like Korea's Chosun Ilbo to Guatemala's Prensa Libre, scrambled to cover the trend, carefully noting the satirical and false nature of the claims, even as they reported on their virality. The Independent and others pointed out the ironic kernel of truth. At 6'9", Barron did technically exceed the standard height limits for most branches of the military, a fact that lent a strange air of plausibility to the entire farce. The White House, besieged by calls for comment on a draft that hadn't existed since 1973 and a height-based exemption they never issued, remained stubbornly silent, which only fueled the fire. It was against this backdrop of digital chaos that the State of the Union address arrived on February 24th. The night was supposed to be the president's triumph, a chance to stand before a joint session of Congress and the American people and tout the successes of his first year back in office. The theme was winning. "Our country is winning again," he declared, his voice booming through the House chamber. "We are winning so much you may get tired of winning." He spoke of an economic turnaround of the ages and defended his aggressive foreign policy, framing it as necessary strength in a dangerous world. But as the president spoke, a different, more intimate drama was unfolding in the gallery. The first family was seated together, a united front of Trumps. Melania, in a sharply tailored suit, sat ramrod straight. To her right, towering over everyone else in the row, was Barron. He was a presence that was impossible to ignore, a full head taller than his siblings, a quiet island in a sea of political performance. The internet, always watching, always dissecting, immediately zeroed in on two things. The first was Barron's tie. The president and all his other sons wore red ties, a uniform, a signal, a brand. Barron wore a blue one. It was a deep, respectable navy, but on that stage, in that context, it was a scream. Social media erupted. "He's clearly signaling he's sympathetic to democratic blue states," one theory read, capturing the imagination of thousands. "He also probably rightfully hates and despises his MAGA cult father." Was it defiance? Was it just a fashion choice? It didn't matter. In the vacuum of information, the narrative filled the space. It was seen as a quiet, powerful act of separation. The second moment was even more telling, and it belonged to Melania. As the First Lady made her way to her seat, she was greeted with cheers and applause. Her path was a gauntlet of political theater. Upon reaching the family row, she leaned in and gave Barron a warm, genuine hug. It was the only moment of unguarded warmth she displayed all night. Then she turned, offered a perfunctory acknowledgement and a tight, forced smile to the rest of the row, which included Ivanka, Don Jr., and Eric, and then faced forward, her expression settling into a mask of polished neutrality. The clip was replayed 1,000,000 times. "Did you see how she snubbed her stepdaughter?" one person wrote, igniting a firestorm of commentary about the rumored long-standing feud between Melania and Ivanka. "Couldn't even have the decency to acknowledge Ivanka," another added. In that single gesture, a lifetime of family gossip and palace intrigue was laid bare for the world to see. Barron was the only one she truly saw. He was her boy, not his. This perception was cemented by a memory that resurfaced in the following days. A few months prior, in a December interview, the president had been discussing Melania's initiatives for children. He had said, "She's got a wonderful boy, and she's very proud of him, her boy." The phrase, seemingly innocuous, now felt loaded with meaning. It suggested a distance, a subtle othering that had always been rumored but never confirmed. Combined with Melania's cold shoulder to the other children and Barron's blue tie, the picture of a fractured family was complete. The president's winning night had been upstaged by the silent, powerful language of his own family's body language.
As the political world obsessed over the State of the Union theatrics, a seemingly unrelated but equally viral story was brewing in another corner of the internet. It involved the former president, Barack Obama, and the vast, unknowable cosmos. On February 14th, Obama had sat down for a long, 47-minute interview with liberal podcaster Brian Tyler Cohen. They covered a range of serious topics: immigration, political polarization, the erosion of democratic norms. But at the very end of the interview, Cohen threw in a quick-fire round of fun questions. The last one was simple: are aliens real? Obama, with a slight chuckle, answered without missing a beat. "They're real, but I haven't seen them. They're not kept in Area 51. There's no underground facility unless there's this enormous conspiracy and they hid it from the President of the United States." The clip went supernova. It was played, replayed, memed, and dissected on every platform imaginable. For a public starved of nonpartisan wonder, the idea that a former president had confirmed the existence of extraterrestrial life was intoxicating. The next day, Obama, perhaps realizing the Pandora's box he had opened, posted a clarification on Instagram. "Statistically, the universe is so vast that the odds are good there's life out there, but the distances between solar systems are so great that the chances we've been visited by aliens is low, and I saw no evidence during my presidency that extraterrestrials have made contact with us. Really." The clarification did little to quell the frenzy. For many, the initial statement was the truth, and the follow-up was the cover-up. The meme potential was too great, and it reached the ears of the current resident of the White House. On February 19th, aboard Air Force One en route to Georgia, a reporter from Fox News shouted a question at President Trump over the whine of the engines. "Sir, any response to President Obama's comments on aliens?" Trump, who had been briefed on the viral moment, seized the opportunity. His face took on a look of mock seriousness. "He gave classified information," Trump said, jabbing a finger for emphasis. "He is not supposed to do that. He made a big mistake, a very big mistake." The reporter scrambled. Classified information? Obama had joked about aliens on a podcast. Trump was asked if he believed aliens were real. "I don't know," he shrugged. "I can tell you he gave classified information. He made a big mistake." The response was classic Trump, a devastatingly effective political jujitsu.
By accusing Obama of leaking classified information, he wasn't just changing the subject from his own controversies over the Iran strikes. He was framing his popular, eloquent predecessor as a loose-lipped security risk, the very thing Trump himself was so often accused of being. He was also, in a strange way, validating the most exciting part of Obama's story, the aliens are real part, by treating it as a serious breach of national security. It was a brilliant piece of political theater that cast Obama as either a fool or a traitor, and it dominated the news cycle for the next 24 hours, successfully pushing the hashtag #SendBarronTrump movement and the State of the Union family drama off the front pages. Meanwhile, in a dorm room at NYU's Stern School of Business, Barron Trump sat in front of his laptop. He had seen it all. The hashtags calling for his head, the satirical website with his face on it, the memes of him in a uniform. He had watched the State of the Union address from the gallery, acutely aware of the scrutiny on his tie, on his mother's every gesture. He had seen his father on TV, gleefully attacking Obama over aliens, seemingly oblivious to the very real, very human storm brewing around his own family's name. He was a 19-year-old college student majoring in business. He was tall, quiet, and intensely private, a strange combination for a member of the most famous and controversial family in the world. His relationship with his father was complex. He respected him, but from a distance. They were not close in the way the public might assume. His mother, Melania, was his anchor, his protector, his confidant. One of the few glimpses the public had in their dynamic was a story his father had told on Fox News months earlier, a story that had recently resurfaced and was going viral again. In the story, Trump was marveling at Barron's technological prowess. He can look at a computer, I turn off his laptop, I said, oh good, and I go back 5 minutes later, he's got his laptop. I say, how do you do that? The president had recounted to Laura Ingraham. Then came the punchline, delivered by the president in a perfect imitation of his son's bored, dismissive tone. None of your business, Dad. The clip was pure comedy gold for the internet. This is exactly how my grandma looks at me when I fix the TV, one user commented. It humanized both of them, showing the universal dynamic of a technologically clueless parent and their savvy teenager. But for Barron, that 5-word phrase had become a kind of mantra. It was his way of maintaining a boundary, of carving out a small space that was his own, separate from the Trump brand that consumed everything. On a chilly evening in early March, as the online furor over the draft and the aliens and the family feud continued to rage, Barron was in his room. He was scrolling through the draftbarrontrump.com website, a wry, almost imperceptible smile playing on his lips. The satire was brutal, but it was also funny. He could appreciate the craft. He saw the photoshopped images of himself and the fake quotes from his brothers. He saw the deep-seated anxiety about the war that the site was tapping into, the fear felt by millions of young men his age that they might be called upon to fight in a conflict they didn't believe in. He understood that the calls for him to be drafted weren't really about him. He was just a symbol, a stand-in for a system that seemed to protect the powerful and sacrifice the powerless. His phone buzzed. It was a text from his mother. Come to the sitting room. Your father wishes to speak to us. He sighed, closed his laptop, and made his way through the secure, quiet halls of the residence to a small, elegantly appointed sitting room. Melania was already there, seated on a plush armchair, her posture perfect. The president was standing by the window, looking out at the lights of the city, his back to the room. He turned as Barron entered. Barron, he said, his voice gruff but not unkind, sit down. Barron sat on a small sofa opposite his mother. The air was thick. You're seeing what's out there, Trump began, gesturing vaguely at the window, as if the internet existed just beyond the pane of glass. This draft thing, it's a joke, a sick comedy writer. Don't let it get to you. It's not getting to me, Barron said quietly. His voice was deep, calm. Trump nodded. Good, good. They're trying to make this about us, about the family. It's always about the family with these people. They can't stand that we're here, that we're winning. Melania spoke, her accent soft, but her words pointed. It is not just the website, Donald. It is the tone, the anger. They are using Barron's name to make people angry at you. It is not fair to him." I know, Trump said, waving a hand dismissively. "But that's the game. They throw everything at you. You saw what I did with Obama and the aliens, right? Boom, took the whole story and flipped it. That's how you play it. You hit back harder." He looked at Barron, a flicker of something that might have been pride or might have been calculation in his eyes. "You're smart. You're handling it. That State of the Union thing with the tie, the media went crazy. Barron's defiance." He laughed, a sharp sound. "It's just a tie, but they need a story. They need to see cracks. They need to see us falling apart, and we don't give it to them. We stay united. You understand?"
Barron nodded, but his mind was elsewhere. The tie hadn't been a calculated act of defiance. It was just a tie he liked. But now, even his clothing choices were being read as political manifestos. Everything he did was scrutinized, interpreted, weaponized. The idea of unity his father spoke of felt like a performance, a shield against the constant barrage of attacks. The only real unity he felt was the silent, steady presence of his mother in the room. He remembered another moment from the State of the Union, one the cameras hadn't caught. After the speech, in the chaotic scrum of well-wishers and politicians, Ivanka then approached their row. She had leaned in to say something to him, and his mother had turned slightly, creating an almost imperceptible barrier, a subtle shift in her body language that excluded Ivanka. It was a ghost of the cold shoulder the world had seen, and it had made him deeply uncomfortable. He loved his mother, but he didn't want to be a pawn in her silent battles with the rest of the family. He just wanted to be a student. The conversation with his father meandered on, a monologue about media strategy and the weakness of the Democrats. Barron tuned most of it out, offering a nod or a grunt when required. Finally, the president clapped his hands on his knees. "All right, we're good. We're strong. We'll get through this. They always underestimate us." He looked at Barron. "You get some sleep. Don't read that garbage." As they stood to leave, Trump paused. "Oh, and Barron, the tech thing. That story about the laptop, the none-of-your-business line. It's getting play again. It's funny. People like it. It makes you look real. Don't worry about it." Barron just nodded. "Good night, Dad." Back in his room, he sat in the dark for a long time, the glow of the city painting soft shapes on the ceiling. He thought about Toby Morton, the comedy writer in his apartment, laughing as he built a website designed to make his life a little bit stranger. He thought about Barack Obama, whose casual joke about aliens had been twisted into a national security crisis by his own father. He thought about the 6 families whose sons and daughters weren't coming home from Iran, the people for whom the war was not a political talking point, but a gaping wound. And he thought about himself, a 19-year-old whose biggest act of rebellion was wearing a blue tie, who was being drafted for a war he didn't support by an army of keyboard warriors who had never met him. He was a symbol, a Rorschach test for a divided nation. To the right, he was a quiet, handsome young man from a great family, unfairly targeted by a vicious left-wing mob. To the left, he was the ultimate symbol of privilege, the draft dodger's son who would never have to pay the price for his father's wars. And to the millions of people in the vast, exhausted middle, he was just a kid, caught in a storm he never asked for. The next morning, a photographer for a wire service staked out near the NYU campus caught a picture of him. He was walking to class, a large backpack slung over one shoulder, his long legs eating up the sidewalk. He was wearing a simple gray hoodie and jeans, earbuds in, eyes on the path ahead. He looked utterly ordinary, completely unremarkable, just another student trying to get an education. The photo went viral, of course. It was analyzed for clues. Was he sad? Was he angry? Was he defiant? Commentators on cable news spent hours dissecting his posture, his clothing, his apparent mood. The consensus was that he looked weary, burdened, and isolated, a perfect portrait of the forgotten son. Barron saw the article and the commentary. He saw the headline, "Barron's Lonely Walk." He almost laughed. He wasn't lonely, he was just walking to class. He had a paper due on Monday, he had a friend he was meeting for coffee later. He had a life, a small, carefully guarded life that existed parallel to the circus, but was not part of it. And as he scrolled past the article, his eye caught another headline. Obama's reply to Trump's alien accusations goes viral. He clicked on it. The article detailed how, in a subsequent interview, Obama had been asked about Trump's classified information accusation. The former president had handled it with his characteristic cool. He had smiled, shaken his head, and said, "I was talking about the vastness of the universe, not the secrets of Area 51. But if it distracts the current administration from, say, the 6 American families who are mourning their children this week, then I suppose it served its purpose. My heart goes out to them. They are the real patriots. They are the ones who have made the sacrifice." It was masterful. In one sentence, Obama had dismissed Trump's attack, reframed it as a distraction, and pivoted back to the human cost of the war, the very thing the #SendBarron movement was meant to highlight. He had reminded everyone what the real issue was, without ever mentioning Barron's name. Barron stared at the screen for a long time. He thought about those families. He thought about the satire and the memes and the political point-scoring. He thought about his father's obsession with winning and Obama's ability to always seem like he was standing on higher ground. He closed the laptop. He had a class to get to. But as he walked out the door, the words echoed in his head. They are the real patriots. He wondered for the millionth time what his own role in all of this was supposed to be. Was he just a prop, a target? Or could he someday be something more than just a name in a headline, a symbol in a culture war? The question hung in the air, unanswered. As he stepped out into the cold March morning, just another young man in a city of millions, trying to find his own way. The story, of course, was far from over. It never was. The hashtags would change, the news cycle would turn, but the currents that had brought them all to this moment, war, privilege, family, and the unrelenting glare of the public eye, would continue to swirl, pulling everyone from the president to the comedy writer to the quiet giant walking to class along in their wake.